Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's a great honour to be here today to unveil this fine memorial in the memory of Admiral Sir John Crace and all those Australian airmen and sailors who fought in the Battle of the Coral Sea with our American allies. I would like to acknowledge the Ngunnawal people, past and present, on whose land this memorial stands, and pay my respects to their elders. On behalf of the Navy, I'd also like to acknowledge the efforts of Derek Hollyoake, Gordon Johnson, John Easthorpe and his design, Ron Bell and his efforts, as we've just heard, and also unmentioned to date is Chris Coulthard-Clarke down the back there, who first wrote the book on Coral Sea battle stations, who I thought brought the Admiral Crace's achievements and the achievements of the Naval Task Group and all those who served in the Battle of the Coral Sea to the wider Australian public. So it's I'm glad to see he's here today. Also like to acknowledge the presence of members of the Ships Company of Australia and Hobart from the battle who are here today as well. And it's wonderful to have their presence here for this this event. We're delighted, of course, to have Sir John Crace's son and his son, Chris, here today, and it adds a particular poignancy to this event. As we've briefly heard from the earlier talk, Jack Crace came from being a young farm boy. What in the 1890s here was prime sheep grazing country. And in 50 years he went to a point where he commanded the Australian ships in the Battle of the Coral Sea, which was quite a desperate affair. As a young boy wishing to go to sea, and before the Australian Navy had a naval college, the only approach really was to go across the world to the UK and join the Britannia Naval College. And Jack did that when he was 15 years old, and he did it with 3 other boys in the colonial cadet scheme. Now, the Britannia Naval College in those days was a pretty tough place, and in fact at times a fairly brutal place. Just to give an indication, when your bathing consisted of a bucket of cold seawater, and you doused yourself, you got changed, and then off you went into instruction. But Jack Crace was a pretty tough kid, and he did quite well at the college, went to the fleet, and it's clear reading his reports that he was a talented person. He was, in short order, he became a fine seaman. He was technically very astute, and he was very innovative. And as a junior officer, his career is littered with bits of innovation that he was able to put into not only his duties, but also to improve the efficiency of the fleet. Jack engineered 2 opportunities to come back to Australia and serve on the Australian Station, as it was known. Most notably, of course, he was in the commissioning crew of the Australia's first flagship, the battlecruiser HMAS Australia. And on the 4th of October 1913, the Australia and other ships of the brand new Australian fleet sailed into Sydney Harbour to a tumultuous reception. And it must have been a proud day for the Crace family when Jack came home. During the interwar period, Jack Crace sailed in every ocean of the world. And by the end of the 1930s, he was one of the most highly regarded cruiser captains in the Royal Navy. And so therefore, in September 1939, when he was promoted to Rear Admiral, he was a logical choice to urgently succeed an ailing Rear Admiral Sir Wilfrid Custis in Australia, who shortly thereafter, in fact, passed away. But so Jack Crace became commander of the Australian Squadron. On arrival in Australia, Jack Crace helped to ensure that our troops were safely escorted to the Middle East, and also that vital convoys during that period safely reached their destination. But his and the Navy's greatest challenge was in meeting the sudden onslaught of the Japanese following their attacks on Pearl Harbor, Singapore and Darwin. And many Australian ships were lost during those dark days. But Jack Crace, flying his flag in the heavy cruiser HMAS Australia, astutely commanded the Australian Squadron in the Battle of the Coral Sea. That battle has been quite often said, was unlike any other before it in naval history. The combined US and Australian fleet, with both carrier and land-based aircraft, and supported by talented people ashore in the intelligence services and code breaking, defeated the Japanese fleet, which was intent, as we've heard, on landing an invasion force at Port Moresby. Quite remarkably, neither fleet ever saw each other. Rather, savage and lethal blows were struck at long range by each other's aircraft. The Japanese and United States fleets each lost an aircraft carrier as well as a handful of smaller ships. The US lost over 500 lives, and we owe an internal debt to our American allies for the sacrifice they made in the Battle of the Coral Sea. The task of the Australian squadron, with with the USS Chicago and 2 other US destroyers, was to block the John Bard Passage, which was the gateway to Port Moresby. Due to Jack Crace's deft manoeuvring of his squadron, the brilliant ship handling of Captain Harold Farncombe in the Australia and Harry Howden in the Hobart, and the coolness and courage of their crews, that they were able to defeat the very determined Japanese air attacks, which were all geared to try and sink that squadron and open up the John Bard Strait. The Royal Australian Air Force, of course, played a notable part in this revolutionary battle for reporting the Japanese fleet in the Coral Sea so that the carrier attacks could be made. At battle's end, the defeated Japanese were forced to turn to their invasion force around and attempt a capture of Port Moresby along a little-known land route called the Kokoda Track. The heroic fight by the Australian Army over that track is rightly immortalised in our nation's history. It is therefore with great honour, 70 years on from the epic Battle of the Coral Sea, that I now go over to unveil this fantastic memorial to Sir John Crace and all the Australians who served in the Battle of the Coral Sea. Thanks very much.